Hello and welcome to another fun build for absolute beginners of Path of Exile in 3.15 Expedition League. My name is Gyro and I present to you my Cyclone Slayer Sharknado Duelist. There are chapters of the video available to make navigation easier for you if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, but I would argue that if you are a real beginner, you'd probably benefit from watching the whole video. So, more specifically, today I will tell you about leveling up your duelist, what gear you should prioritize and what key skills to use, how to build up your passive skill tree, what Ascendancy to go for, what Pantheon gods work best for this build, what playstyle I recommend for this build, Sharknado cosmetics, and for what to look out for, or so to speak, warnings. Make yourself a cup of tea, get comfortable, and please only do one extra thing for me right now. Like the video to offset all the negativity that I've been bombarded by lately from the toxic elitists of Path of Exile community. And please consider subscribing to show your further support and to not miss out on any of my further videos. It is really very much appreciated. With all of this out of the way, let's jump into this. Leveling up a melee character in Path of Exile 3.15 can be challenging and is certainly harder, on average, if we compare this process to leveling ranged characters, pretty much any builds, Ranger, Witch, even a Templar. I found leveling the Duelist much easier than my Marauders, for example, as this Duelist felt a lot quicker. Plus I had a few leveling unique gear pieces such as the speed increasing boots and a pretty amazing sword that I'll talk to you about very shortly in the next gear section. Point is, when it's your very first character in the game, or in this particular league, which became a little bit harder compared to other leagues by the way, it's always harder to play a melee character. Hence the general recommendation for newbies to not make a melee character your very first one in Path of Exile. I would personally go with something more basic and less gear dependent, such as Arc Witch or any Summoner Witch variants, but that's just me. So back to this duelist. I have leveled primarily using Perforate as a skill. It hits an area, makes enemies bleed, and it just is feeling very good and quite straightforward to use. I prefer it to Ground Slam. I know a lot of people use Ground Slam, I prefer Perforate. Once you get one of the aura gems, such as Blood and Stone, you would be also able to switch between Blood Stance for more focused damage output, say on bosses, and Sand Stance, where Perforate will hit everything around you, which is much better for clearing maps. Once you get to level 28-ish, and do the first couple of quests in Sun encampment, you should get your hands on Cyclone skill that this whole build is about. Now, we will smoothly move to gear and key skills as we talk about Cyclone, right? So Cyclone Duelist, as most, if not all, melee builds in Path of Exile are relatively gear dependent, meaning that without certain gear they won't perform nearly as well as similarly built and invested into ranged character, how that would work in your hands, yeah? I do use some uniques which made my leveling up of this particular character and starting the endgame mapping quite enjoyable, but please do not think that this gear is absolutely mandatory, because it is not. The build will work without any uniques as long as you prioritize preferred specific stats, trying to optimize your picks of yellow rare items in a certain way. So I would recommend that you boost your physical damage, critical chance, evasion rating, life and mana leech, and life pool and all resistances. In my case, the whole build relied on this unique sword, Edge of Madness, that I could start using around level 22 if memory serves me right, which boosted my damage at that point in time by a lot. The fact that it gave me some chaos damage and kept increasing that chaos damage by 1% with every gained level made it virtually irreplaceable until the very end game, where I was trying to regularly roll new rare two-handed swords and see if they would do more damage, but nope, Edge of Madness was a winner all along. The first cluster of 4 linked skill gems in my sword is powering the Ancestral Protector totem, which contributes a bit of damage, but we don't care about it that much and mainly rely and add value to it because of the massive attack speed and melee strike range increase that it gives our Cyclone, which is our main skill. Ancestral Protector is supported by the chance to bleed that we want to spread around as damage over time effect as much as possible, multiple totems support, which I personally believe doubles the attack speed boost that the Ancestral Protector gives us, but I am not 100% sure on that and would happily stand corrected if somebody will correct me kindly. And finally we have some damage increasing onslaught support, which doesn't seem like the best addition here, but I simply didn't have anything better for this slot just yet, and to be honest with you, the build has not been yet optimized for end game. This is a beginner friendly build that takes you there. As a leveling chest piece, I'm using Tabula Rasa, simple robe with no stats, but with 6 linked sockets that can take any color gem you like, which is why it is considered to be the best default pick for any leveling character who has a rich uncle or was simply lucky enough to get this Tabula Rasa robe. If you don't have it, then any 4 linked socket chest piece with the preferred primary stats of dexterity, evasion, physical damage, resistances would be probably a very good solid choice for a beginner of Path of Exile. Here I have my main cluster of gems supporting the crown jewel, Cyclone, a channeled physical AoE attack skill that makes our Cyclone builds resemble Whirlwind Barbarian from Diablo 3 so much. It's hard not to fall in love with this skill when you see it in action and basically mow the enemies down as you move through the maps. Cyclone is supported by Bleed support, Onslaught support, Fortify support to boost our survivability by about 25%, reducing the incoming damage, Cruelty support and Maim support. Basically anything that makes our damage as powerful, as awesome as it can be. As a helmet I use the Peregrine with a bunch of amazing stats for this build: increased accuracy, armor, evasion, leeching mana and increasing speed. I have Herald of Purity minion gem here, not because it adds a massive amount of damage or because it's a minion build, it's not, but it simply boosts my physical damage by a bit, and it runs interference, so to speak, as they say, preoccupying and distracting some enemies while I spin around them, and every bit can help in tight spots. So Herald of Purity is supported by Multi-Strike to give it extra damage and simply because why not, right? And nothing else here, not because I'm lazy, but because every support gem of a similar nature, at the very least in this new League 3.15, it reserves more and more mana, in case you didn't know how it works as a beginner of the game. My boots are Victorious Flight, where we have once again dexterity, evasion, movement speed, and an Ascendancy enchantment that regenerates me some life if I was hit recently. For movement, I use currently unsupported Dash gem, which you could support by the second wind support gem, just look it up, and I will probably do the same as I change out of Tabula Rasa into proper endgame gear and move these gems around a little bit too. I still, at this point in time, as I enter the lowest tier of Atlas maps, I run with a Lightning Golem for the increased accuracy and critical strike, but it's also unsupported, not optimized in my current setup, and frankly, I could kinda take it or leave it if I, let's say, needed this slot for something else, but at the moment I don't, so it keeps running with me. My belt is nothing to write home about, but it helps leech some more health and mana from my attack damage, which makes it very, very handy. And finally I have Lactonial Caress gauntlets that are great because they increase my attack speed and have 10% chance to give me a power, frenzy or endurance charge on kill, which basically means that it makes me randomly stronger in different areas as I mow the mobs down with my Cyclone. Not the best piece for this particular build probably, but not the worst for sure. In the gauntlets I have my ever-present cast when damage taken support, which powers the Immortal Call gem. that reduces any incoming damage by about 25% in the tight spots, and it saved my skin and it will save yours on many occasions, so absolutely do that. For auras, I run Blood and Sand, either boosting area damage in blood or increasing the effect in the sand stance. And then I also run with Defiance Banner that I never bother dropping, and I simply carry it around for a passive increase of my armor and evasion rating by 45% while reducing enemies' critical strike chance by 27% at my current gem level 16. My rings and amulet are not mentioned here and not optimized at all right now and remain a fun little endgame project for me to still complete. I will let you know if I keep playing this build in the endgame and come up with a better and more refined gear combination, and well, then we can just zoom in on gear specifically. But generally, so that you know, I move on to try other builds once my job here is done, and I believe that I've helped you get to the end game as a newbie. Now, very quickly talking about the passive skill tree, please see the link to Path of Building, web simulation tool, and the paste bin link for the whole build, with the whole build, in the description below this video, so that you can slow down and take a look at every node that I've taken. No point talking you through it here in great detail, it would take us half an hour. Key direction though is that first you kind of go a bit down and then move towards the right side of the skill tree and towards the upper right side of the skill tree, taking mana leech, life and mana leech, wind dancer, thick skin, among a bunch of other big nodes on the way to the fatal blade that would increase your damage with swords. That would be probably the first time when you would make a commitment to fight with swords. I did it because I had Edge of Madness available to me, that we spoke already about. And if you don't have an awesome sword or simply don't like swords and would prefer an axe, well, then your build would have to be a little bit different, and it would be different from my build, unfortunately. Then I would keep going up along the right edge of the skill tree to the big nodes of Acrobatics and Phase Acrobatics. We absolutely need those nodes, they are priority 1 nodes for us, because we very much need those to boost our survivability. I personally took a jewel socket here, simply because I had a decent, it's not great, but a decent choice of a rare jewel that boosted damage with swords and increased my area damage. Otherwise, I personally wouldn't have bothered, if I didn't have a good jewel sitting in my stash. I also took the major node of Vaal Pact that I just mentioned to you a little bit earlier, once I had those priority 1 acrobatics nodes taken, as the most self-sustain of this build comes from leeching life as you attack, as you spin and attack enemies. So Vaal Pact removes life regeneration effect, but kinda who cares about it, because it doubles our life leech. Remember how I said that you need to keep spinning to stay alive? Well, this is why. Then we move towards the lower left of the skill tree and keep boosting our damage with swords, taking Blade of Cunning. And forget about the cluster jewel socket for now, we will briefly mention it a bit later. We keep moving up and left along the skill tree edge, boosting our life, further sword damage, taking Blade Master node. Then I personally chose to take Juggernaut and a bunch of smaller nodes here, and eventually Diamond Skin, to further increase my life pool and elemental resistances. Once all of that was done, that's when I came back to take that cluster jewel close to Blade of Cunning node, and I used the Glyph Scar jewel in it, which increased a bunch of useful stats for me, all around useful stats, attack damage, elemental resistances, and to a lesser degree armor. When it comes to cluster jewels, your mileage may and probably will vary, especially as a beginner, so see what you have there and leave those choices for last, I think. If you don't have cluster jewels, don't worry about cluster jewels at all, boost your primary weapon damage, swords, physical damage, and invest into extra life pool and extra elemental resistances. Now talking about Ascendancy, we are going for Duelist Ascendancy Slayer. And during your first pass through the labyrinth around level 33, you would be taking Brutal Fervor, increasing life leech and reducing damage taken while you are spinning to win, while you are leeching effectively. The second time you go through the labyrinth, I have taken Bane of Legends to increase my damage and become immune to reflected damage, which actually is very important because sometimes if mobs can reflect damage to you, you're dead before you know it. So let's mitigate that straight away. The third time through the labyrinth that I simply didn't have time to run through before recording this footage, I had to capitalize on my free time today and record when I could. I would go for Impact node to increase melee range, accuracy, and to do more damage to closer enemies. I think it's a pretty easy choice. And the fourth time, you would ask me, well, that's where you're not a beginner anymore, mate, and you should work it out for yourself then. As far as Pantheon god choices are concerned, I never usually talk about them, but why not? For Pantheon god choices, I went with Lunaris as a major god for the increase of movement speed and reduction of the incoming damage. Not by much, but every little helps, every little bit helps here, of course. And for the minor god, I personally went with Ralakesh to avoid bleeding, because being otherwise quite low on life, very strong bleeding or burning will kill you very quickly. So I wanted to at least partially mitigate that risk. Now, recommended playstyle. Look, it's pretty obvious by now, probably from all the demo that I've shown you in the background and from all the narrative that you've been listening to. I remember to keep spinning if you want to live. I said that many times through the video. You leech life and all of your damage boosts and incoming damage decreases come from your spinning. So you need to continue spinning. If you don't spin and you approach a bunch of mobs, they will kill you very quickly. Put the ancestral totems down whenever you see anything more than a trivial few 2, 3, 4, 5 mobs that you will mow down without noticing them particularly. Point number 3. While you do evade very well and you dodge a lot of damage while leeching a lot of life, you are still very squishy and you don't have a big life pool. At the moment of recording of this video and in my leveling gear, and Tabula Rasa obviously has no stats on it as my robe, I have only 2000 points of life. That is not much. A lot of stuff can and will one-shot you if you're not lucky and didn't evade the hit. It won't happen too often, I wouldn't say, if you're not just standing there, but it will happen, so try and be careful about your positioning, keep moving around bigger mobs, stay on the move constantly, and obviously try and kind of circular saw them, so to speak, with your cyclone from the back and from the sides. Don't just stand in front of them, don't just square off with them. Now, brief honorable mention of Sharknado cosmetics. Shark Cyclone is obviously very optional piece of cosmetic microtransaction that they've added to the game very recently, but I absolutely love it. The cost of it equals to something like 15 bucks, but it might be a little steep for one spell effect for you. In fact, I'd say probably for one spell effect it is, but I simply loved it. I invest into my entertainment, and 15 bucks, what is it? It's like going to the movies in the good old days when we could once. So I thought that it was money well spent. I don't regret buying it, but the choice is up to you. You can just buy it from the microtransaction shop in the game. It's not a buy to win. It is just, you know, it's just a fun little thing here. Now, final thoughts and a couple of things to look out for, or warnings. I've already warned you that you need to keep spinning. That's the first thing. Do not be static with this build or you'll be dying all the time, and I don't want to hear any complaints, alright? And one less obvious thing that I want to point out to you here is that I do not recommend that you play this build with a bad internet connection or server ping. If you believe that you have, you know, lag spikes, very frequent lag spikes, genuinely bad connection, bad responsiveness from the server from wherever in the world you are, melee builds take a lot of punishment if you lag out while standing in front of the bosses, for example. And such a nimble, skinny, spin-to-win build like this one will absolutely suffer if your connection is unstable, so don't play it. Final thoughts, my friends, before I thank you for listening to me today. I love this build. It probably is my favorite melee build in Path of Exile 3.15. So if I play melee builds for now in the game, it probably will be this one. I absolutely think that you should try it. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope to hear from you. How did you choose to modify the build, if at all, or if you followed exactly my path that I showed to you here? If this worked well for you, if it didn't work well for you, let's communicate and let's talk about your personal findings and how much fun did you have with this particular build. Please like the video. Don't forget to like the video. It's really important for my motivation to keep producing positive, good videos for beginners of Path of Exile rather than elitist experts. And subscribe to the channel. That is the ultimate way to support me, of course, and not to miss out on any further videos. So thank you very much for watching, tuning in today, and I'll be speaking with you again about something else, Path of Exile, or some other game related, because having fun is the most important thing. See you later. Bye for now.